Sorry. You.
Thank you. Collecting more people, that's awesome. Okay, all right, and thank you for joining us. I promised treats and they really are at the back, so please make sure you take some of those. I'm happy to introduce to you today students from St. Thomas More Collegiate who are physically in BC. They will be presenting here. They've been working very hard on a project through Students on the Beamlines. And they have an interesting story to tell, but I'm not going to give anything away for you. So thank you for coming and joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
Good afternoon. We are students from St. Thomas More Collegiate in Burnaby, BC, and this is our Beamlines project mint condition. Stop changing. So, my name's Anya and I'm in grade 10. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that we are located on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. The c.l.s. is located in Saskatoon on Treaty 6 territory in the traditional territories of the Nahiawak, Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations. And it is the traditional homeland of the Métis. We recognize their enduring connection to this land, and we express our gratitude for the opportunity to gather on this shared territory.
My name is Lucas Rodriguez. I'm a senior at St. Thomas More Collegiate. So Indigenous communities are deeply connected to the land and our ecosystems. Connecting Indigenous perspectives with scientific research is crucial because it brings a cultural and ethical approach to scientific knowledge, especially when studying the nature and effects on our environment. Moreover, our research is specifically local to BC, making it more important to acknowledge Indigenous culture as blackberries and mint are widely used by local Indigenous communities. We honor the relationships between Indigenous people and their land and hope to be able to highlight the environmental impacts on their traditional food sources. It ensures a respectful and mindful research to those who have deep-rooted connections with the land being studied. Historically, the blackberry plant, roots, leaves, and berries have been used as medicine by the Indigenous people in combination with other plants. They have used the plants to treat cancer, dysentery, diarrhea, whooping cough, anemia, sore throat, minor bleeding, and other illnesses. The Indigenous people also consume the plant as a food source and use it as a craft material for making baskets from the stems once the thorns are removed. Since many Indigenous communities are deeply connected to the land and environment, this includes blackberries, our potential findings could potentially encourage and provide evidence to advocate for stronger environment protections against pollution. By investigating the safety of the species, we can ensure the safety and preservation of the blackberries as a food source. Indigenous communities possess a wealth of ecological knowledge, which could enhance the scientific understanding of how pollutants and microplastics may have entered the environment. For this reason, it is important to try to continuously collaborate with members of the Indigenous communities throughout our project.
Good afternoon. My name is Angelo Lee, and I'm a grade 12 student at St. Thomas More Collegiate. Initially, the goal of our project was to determine how the location of wild blackberry plants affects the potential presence of microplastics within them. We predicted that wild blackberry plants grown in areas affected by pollution are at a higher risk of being contaminated with microplastics. Originally, we planned on utilizing the mid-IR beamline at the Canadian light source for our project. However, we were notified that the mid-IR beamline was unavailable during our expected trip. As a result, we planned on utilizing the IDEA's beamline instead and augmented our research question accordingly. In addition, we realized that having a control group to compare our wild blackberry plants to would be beneficial for future data analysis. As a result, we decided to grow our own blackberry plants in the greenhouse of our school. However, we soon realized that the process of growing blackberry plants exceeded the expected timeline for our trip to the c.l.s. in February of this year. As a result, we decided to consult backup plants and settled on mint, which only takes approximately 2 months to grow. Furthermore, we decided that it would be beneficial to start collecting data which we could analyze before our trip to the c.l.s. As a result, we decided to dose the soil of our mint plants with varying amounts of microplastics according to a set gradient. The new goal of our project was to determine how the presence of microplastics in the soil affects the growth of mint plants. We predicted that an increased concentration of microplastics in the soil would negatively affect their growth. Throughout the preparation of our project, our ability to adapt and remain proactive played a vital role as we navigated the challenges of real-life scientific research.
Hi, my name is Kimmy Chua and I'm in grade 12. Since we started this project in June of 2024, we've been working on different things in preparation for data collection. So at first we decided that our project was going to focus on microplastics in wild blackberries. We chose this because it is a local species in BC and everyone has picked them and eaten them without knowing whether or not it is harmful to us. We collected them individually in different locations and froze them in tinfoil to avoid contamination from other plastic sources, and we preserved them until they are needed for experimentation. A few of us visited the Indigenous garden located in UBC called the Wissishisum Garden, where we were able to gain a general knowledge about blackberries and the way they grow. While we were here, we met with Dallas Pelly, who was the Beamline mentor for last year's group. And with the knowledge of the volunteers working there, we learned about not only the significance that gardens and natural planting has on Indigenous communities, but we also learned the two different types of blackberries, which are Himalayan, the most commonly found everywhere, and trailing blackberries, which are least commonly seen in these areas. We were also given the opportunity to braid sweetgrass and further understand Indigenous traditions.
Hi, I'm Carly and I'm in grade 12. So we realized that simply looking at microplastics presence in collective blackberries would be risky and lack variables to do comparison with. So we decided that we would have a control group of blackberry plants that we grow with different levels of microplastics dosed in the soil. This way, we will be able to compare microplastics in wild blackberries with a control group of grown blackberries and also possibly look at the effects microplastics have on plant growth. As the project progressed and we had more discussions with our mentors, we decided that we would need to develop a backup plan as we were afraid that the blackberries won't grow in time. So we made a plan, which will be discussed in the next few slides, gathered materials, and started the planting process.
Hi, my name is Christopher Delazar, and I'm a grade 12 student. A little bit more detail about why we chose blackberries and why we, in the end, were not able to end up using them. So we chose blackberries due to their relevance in BC in connection to the Indigenous population. When we started collecting our blackberries in September 2024, we soon realized that picking blackberries from the wild would have far too many variables, so we decided that we wanted to have a control group that we could compare them with. So as a result, we decided to start to try to grow our own blackberries. However, blackberries have a 1 to 2 month germination process, which means that with our given timeline of with our original beam time in February of 2025, we would likely be unable to go through this process. Furthermore, blackberries don't actually start growing the physical plants until 1 to 2 years after they sprouted. So this would mean that blackberries would not be a possibility for us.
Hi, my name is Olivia and I'm in grade 12. So because of how long the process of growing blackberries is, we decided to consider an alternative plant when we raised concern about germination time, as it would shorten the amount of time of growth. So some of the options that we researched were Swiss chard, giant winter spinach, and finally mint. Mint seeds germinate for 7 to 14 days compared to the 2 to 3 weeks required for blackberries, and approximately needed 2 months to grow. This made it an excellent candidate, as at that point we had sufficient time from then until the original beam time in February for it to do so. Mint also has a similar connection and relevance as blackberries to Indigenous communities, as it is consumed for medicinal use. It is turned to a beverage to treat colds, coughs, chest pains, and thought to prevent illness. So we decided to go forward with this decision and planted the mint, separating and putting 3 seeds in each section as seen in the photo.
Hi, I'm Wilson in grade 12, and I will discuss the relevance of our project. So our project is relevant because it will contribute economically, socially, and environmentally. There's been lots of research done on the microplastic effects on animals, but that's the problem. It mostly only concerns the effects on animals in the ecosystem. Researching plants specifically provides unique insight to the science community. Economically, our research could influence agricultural practices. If a significant level of microplastics are found, crop quality in agriculture could be changed through techniques reducing plastic exposure. There may be a push towards government to regulate microplastics ingestion and people to invest in measures to reduce microplastic levels found in crops. Socially and environmentally, this project has the potential to raise awareness about environmental issues such as pollution and their effects on our environment. Investigating the contamination in plants specifically highlights the tainting ecosystems and local food sources.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin Kokua, and I'm a grade 12 student at St. Thomas More. Because we planted our mint during the winter months of November to January, they were exposed to much colder climates compared to British Columbia's summer seasons, slowing down the growth of our plants. While our winters are still warmer than those in Saskatoon, we still get a lot of downpour that created a difficult environment for our plants to grow, despite the numerous growing attempts, due to the lack of sunlight on top of our inexperience in growing plants from seed. Although we tried combating these problems through the use of grow lights and the greenhouse on the top of our school provided to us by Brother O'Neill, which we hoped would help with the light levels and the heat the plant received, there was still no success. As a result, we had to receive external help from Leong's Nursery, which is owned by an STMC alumna, by making use of their generous donation of already grown mint plants to move forward with our experiment.
Good afternoon. My name is Joaquin Imperial, and I'm in grade 12, and I'll be talking about the microplastic research part of this project. When deciding which microplastics to use for dosing the plants, we focus on 3 key points: which microplastics are most commonly found in the environment, what variables we would need to consider and control to ensure conclusive results, and the dosing methods we would use. Our research included reviewing previous studies involving microplastics and plant interaction, which helped guide our decision-making. Out of the 3 points, we placed the greatest emphasis on limiting variables. This step was crucial because it allowed us to isolate the effects of microplastics, giving us confidence that any changes we observed in the plants were directly linked to the microplastics and not influenced by any external factors.
We were also initially undecided between 3 different dosing methods: dosing by mixing our plastic into the soil, dosing through microplastic contaminated water, and dosing through chemical fertilizers. In the end, we decided not to use chemical fertilizers because we wanted to introduce as little external chemicals as possible for our experiment to get more direct results. We also decided not to use dosed water because we found that it was unlikely that microplastics would contaminate wild plants through rain. So we decided to dose our mint plants through soil so that the plants can absorb the microplastics through their roots. Using dosed soil would also better connect to real-world scenarios because most plants are contaminated through already existing microplastics in the soil.
So the microplastics we decided on was acrylic microplastics because they are commonly found in the wild as a result of textile shedding and industrial processes, and because they were sold in a size that was compatible with our research, which was approximately 3 to 4 nanometers.
I'm Yashane in grade 12, and I'm going to be talking about the strategy we use for dosing. The strategy we use to dose our plants were to follow a dosing gradient. We dosed our soil in 4 levels: undosed, slightly dosed, medium dosed, and heavily dosed. To prepare our experiment, we began by measuring out 800 grams of soil into a glass beaker for each pot. After that, we added the appropriate microplastic dosage gradients into the soil. For each stage of the gradient, we began at 0% for undosed, 0.05% for slightly dosed, 0.5% for medium dosed, and 5% for heavily dosed. Using these percentages, we calculated the amount of microplastic needed based on the mass of the soil, giving us values of 0 grams for undosed, 0.40 grams for slightly dosed, 4 grams for medium dosed, and 40 grams for heavily dosed. Upon measuring out the acrylic in a glass beaker, we poured it into the pots that were filled with soil. We then took metal rakes and small metal handheld shovels to mix the acrylic into the soil. We prepared 2 pots for each level to ensure consistency in our results. Once the soil was dosed, we carefully transplanted the spearmint plants into each pot. These pots were then watered and moved into the greenhouse, where we set up grow lights to simulate optimal sunlight. This setup was especially important to support healthy plant growth during the harsh winter months.
As the plants in the greenhouse grew, we collected leaf samples of each gradient every month to track the growth of the leaves, drying them and storing them in containers for future use. We hope to later analyze them at the Canadian light source to determine a trend in the amounts of essential metals as the plants grew, which could then be extrapolated to indirectly determine the effects of microplastics within the plants as well. If plants of higher microplastic dosages were seen with less essential metals, then we can infer that microplastic concentration has resulted in a blockage of nutrients for the plants, causing them to be less healthy than other plants.
Back in December, we were notified by the c.l.s. that there were challenges in getting the c.l.s. to come back after its upgrading process. Our beam time was delayed at the time, but on March 4th, 2025, we were notified that all beam time up until June of 2025 will be canceled, and there will not be a chance for us to travel to Saskatoon for the c.l.s. in this academic year. Since most of our team are seniors, this project cannot be delayed into the next academic year. Instead, and we tried contacting local facilities for suggestions or even help in analyzing our samples, but unfortunately, none of them were able to lend us the equipment, which puts our project on halt at the time.
My name's Anna, I'm in grade 12 and I'm a returning Beamline member. So like Wilson said, we were kind of at a halt in our project and we kind of decided to look into different possibilities of analyzing our samples. One of them was chlorophyll analysis, so seeing basically how green the leaves are compared to the dosed and undosed ones. But since this is heavily reliant on like angles for the camera and lighting, it probably wouldn't be that accurate. So we turned to maybe seeing the mass data, so weighing each type, like averaging the leaves for each plant and seeing maybe if undosed or dosed plants have heavier leaves or lighter leaves. And then lastly, even just looking at the plants, you could see that the dosed plants actually looked healthier. They're the ones here on the right. I mean, these are the dosed ones that look kind of dead compared to the, sorry, that's the other way around. But yeah. And then even though we don't really have results, our project is still very promising and we have a very strong hypothesis. According to an article by Frontiers in Plant Science, microplastics have shown significant effects on plant growth and root stress. Some of these effects include ionic imbalance, so microplastics enter root cells and cause membrane damage and increased reactive oxygen species. And this activates channels that push out important nutrients like potassium, iron, and zinc that lead to nutrient shortages and stress in roots. And this could be easily picked up by a beamline using XRF data. And then there's gene expression changes, hormonal disruption, soil and health effects, and also effects on seed germination. And because our project aims to determine how the presence of microplastics in soil affects plant growth, ideally our project could be used to show specific changes in water retention, concentration in minerals, and changes in root length, to name a few that could prove or disprove our hypothesis. Hopefully one day a future Beamline group from STM could continue our research and yeah.
So even though the year proceeded very differently from our expectations, it still provided us insights into the scientific process. We struggled a lot with both physical and logistic challenges. Growing plants in the winter were difficult for gardening beginners like us, but having our beam time repeatedly moved, then ultimately canceled was also deflating. Through talking to our mentors, we learned that this is actually very similar to how real-life scientific research goes. The process of a project will hold many obstacles and demand adjustments. So the way that our project turned out mirrors this closely. Although this project was not smooth sailing, it was valuable in teaching us adaptability, flexibility, and resilience. If it weren't for the time constraint, we would gladly continue this project, even if the c.l.s. continues to be unavailable in the near future. We've learned to collaborate with each other and work as a team while knowing when to turn to our mentors or external facilities for support.
I was brought onto this project as a special 13th member on a role that had never been created before. My main objective would be to produce a video, some sort of advertisement for both the student on the Beamlines club here at STMC and the students on the Beamline experience for the people at the c.l.s. However, due to the unfortunate timing of the c.l.s's downtime, I was unable to produce said video, but I did enter into contact with Greg Baskey at the c.l.s, who is the head of media management, and I was planning on working closely with him to produce said video.
I'll briefly touch from my experience from last year. I would definitely say the trip to the c.l.s, being able to collect real-time data, interpret it, present it, and prepare samples, and using lab equipment and working with scientists at the c.l.s was truly one of the most remarkable and memorable experiences I had in high school. The year-long effort of brainstorming, sample collection, drafting proposals, and getting to know your team and finding a cause you want to research was definitely the most transformative part. Although we didn't get to go to the c.l.s this year, we got to experience and build the backbone of our Students Researcher Foundation. And as mentioned previously, we still have a very interesting and promising project that one day we or future STMC team hope to bring to fruition.
As mentioned previously in our presentation, we were given MIN plans by Caitlin Leong, who is an alumna of our high school. We would like to express our gratitude to her and to Leong's nursery for their major contributions to our project.
And finally, there are a few more special people that we would like to thank on behalf of the Beamline team. From the c.l.s staff, Tracy, Robert, Anna Maria, and Dallas, you guys have provided us scientific guidance on our project and kept us updated on the c.l.s. They have been essential in every part of our decision-making process. From the STMC staff, first of all, Ms. Cameron, for spending time with us discussing practicalities of our project. Brother O'Neill, who lent us his MIN plant and gave us his gardening space. And finally, our mentor, Mr. Muse, for picking this group of us, dedicating tremendous time throughout the year in mentoring us and contacting external sources and even doing the research with us. We're extremely grateful to have you mentor this project. And that is the end of our presentation. Now I ask if anyone has any questions for us.
Thank you very much. I'm very impressed with some of the changes that you made since last week. Good job, you guys. That was fantastic. Maybe have all of you come up in front of the camera now. While we're doing that, is there anyone that has some questions you'd like to pose? Other than who's trying to break through the wall? Yeah.
It's not about the project, but they are all grade 12, 13. So what's the plan for them? Or any of them that will be sticking with the science, considering this past year difficulties, or
Could you guys hear that question?
No, sorry.
It was a little garbled. If you could restate.
Okay, I'm a little closer to the mic, so I'll repeat it. Dr. Zuin is wondering if, since many of you are in grade 12, what are you doing next year? Especially, are you continuing in science, especially considering some of your challenges from this year?
Maybe we can go in a line and just
Yeah.
we're doing our.
So we're just gonna start here. I am not going into sciences, even though but this project has given me a lot of scientific insight and how the scientific project process usually works. And I think it's valuable, even though I'm going into business, that I've got to experience this project.
I'm taking applied sciences at UBC next year.
I'm taking econ, and then I hope to do more sciences in my second year.
I'm doing life sciences at UT next year.
I'm going into science at UBC.
I'm also going into science at UBC, and the skills that I think I learned doing this project is really going to help build a foundation for any research that I do.
I'm going to be going into applied sciences at UBC next year.
I'm going to be doing chemical engineering at UBC next year.
I'm going to be going to business at SFU next year.
I'm going into applied science next year as well.
Yes, I'll be also going to applied science at UBC.
I'm a junior member, so I have a few years left, but I'm interested in going to
So lots of applied sciences. Okay, other questions?
I guess I can ask one. What would be where solution for microplastic issues?
Do you have a proposed solution for some of the microplastic issues that we do have around the world today? No?
Maybe future scientists can answer that question.
Yeah. Remember, it's okay to say, I don't know, if you don't know.
We haven't looked into it yet because microplastic is something that's really hard to biodegrade. So I think that microplastics pollution is generally something that will continue to occur, but we haven't looked into the proposed solution yet because we didn't really get a chance to analyze our results anyway.
So I have a question for you. You see, if I heard you correctly, you said that it was the plants that you gave the heaviest dose of microplastics to that seemed to be the healthiest. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the ones that looked more dead were actually the undosed ones, which is really surprising.
Okay, did you water them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And did you double check your labels? Are you absolutely sure that those are the plants that were dosed?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
A follow-up question to that. I'm curious how you measured out the volume. You said that, oh no, it wasn't in the water.
No.
It was in the soil.
It was
right?
in the soil. But I know that when my plants don't do well, it's either because I underwater them or watered them, depending on my failure that day.
They do, alcohol from Lucina, or they do just sugar, and they both were the.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm answering for you. Her question was, did you do just one pot at each dose?
We did two for each grade, for each level.
Yeah, and was it both of the dosed ones were healthy and both of the zero ones were not healthy?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess I'll follow up from there. Did they water them the same amount? Did they control and measure the amount that they water each plant? Could you hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, each plot received the same amount of water, which we took from the school's drinking water, and yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because we've had several groups this year that are looking at plants and microplastics, but in different scenarios and different plants and things like that. And one of the other student groups, you at STM might find this interesting too. We had a group that was looking, they were growing cilantro in a hydroponic situation where they'd introduced microplastics. And what they found is that every attempt they made, and they also made several attempts at growing their plants, the mixture of the nutrients that are supposed to go with hydroponics and tap water killed the plants. But the nutrients and distilled water did not, or tap water alone did not. So there's been some very interesting results with that. Maybe.
Doing that, I do some hydroponic planting. I generally have my water, I leave my water for a couple of days to get rid of the chemical.
Yeah, the fluoride in particular, yeah. Okay. Okay. So a couple of suggestions that are coming out of the audience here are to boil, if you wanted to write some suggestions for your hopeful group that's going to follow up, for them to boil the water instead of straight up tap water in order to, and also to let it sit for several days to let some of the chemistry evaporate, and then boil it to get rid of potential algae spores, I guess, that might be in the water. And the chlorine for the evaporating. So that might be a suggestion. Okay, last question then. And you did address a number of these things in your final slide when you talked about what you were learning, even though you didn't get a chance to come to c.l.s. My question to you is, what is the one thing that you learned or experienced in this year that you're going to take forward into your post-secondary that you think will help you? What skill or what thing did you get out of this that will help you? And I'd like each of you to answer.
Sorry. Personally, for me, I think consistency is kind of the most important thing, especially in our effort, as we had a failed ideation of blackberries, and then we kind of took that and then had mint, and also being consistent with watering and just having good thoughts, or like not being sad or upset with any other challenges that we kind of face.
That's hard though. That's really hard. I'll acknowledge that. You guys had a tough go, and you're doing awesome. Keep going.
I think for me, the biggest thing is just resilience and kind of just knowing that keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, even though there might be failures and things that don't go the way you want them to go, just don't give up and kind of like stay committed to it.
I think for me, doing just background research is really like important when you're trying to build a project. And for this one, like the good part about it, yes, we don't have results, but we know we could have results based on similar research that has been done. So I think that's really comforting as well. So I think, yeah, just doing your background research is really important.
I think the biggest thing for me is that resilience plays a key role in anything that you do. So our group faced several factors from the outside which we weren't expecting. The c.l.s shut down, we didn't have enough time to grow our blackberries, and there were plenty of other factors within the group. But we kept pushing forward, we kept finding workarounds, and the biggest takeaway from all of that really is the resilience.
For me, it was the value of the teamwork that we had at this team. Even though we faced many struggles because of each of us playing our own roles, whether it was dosing the plants or doing the background research, all of us were able to come together and successfully produce the project that we were able to complete so far.
For me, since I did a lot of like work on keeping the data and dosing the plants, so a big takeaway for me is like how precise you have to be and how accurate you have to be when you're doing an experiment like this, and like how much data you have to collect, and you have to be able to keep track of it and also be able to communicate that data to like other people working on your team and also other people that don't know much about it.
For me, it would be that you should be able to change and adapt to the challenges and like pivot your ideas so that they still stay the same from the core, but like you can do it even no matter the challenges.
For me, it's the process of designing. When you're given all the resources that you can and given all the support, how do you design a good project in general, not just in science, that utilizes your resources the best and also considers other things, like because we were going to do a project on fish or even humans, but we had to consider the bioethics of that, and we were given the authority to design this project, and I think that experience is really special to us.
Similar to Wilson, I think I gained most from learning about how to design a scientific process, from going steps of like, oh, we don't have anything, we have an idea, and then going from that idea to then building a experiment out of it and getting data from that.
I think for me, other than learning more about gardening, I would say being able to take suggestions from mentors and being able to have that communication to fix and overcome like all of those challenges.
For me, I think it's how important it is to have a good work ethic as a team. Not falling behind in things like watering plants and staying staying in communication with your whole team and like having a good collaboration or having good collaboration.
My biggest takeaway from this project was our ability to remain proactive and adapt to whatever challenges we face. As for many of us, this was our first time conducting real-life scientific research. Many of the challenges that we faced, although they were huge obstacles, we were able to pivot and find ways to continue our research while dealing with the challenges of conducting scientific research. And so being able to have this ability to remain proactive and adapt was really essential throughout the preparation of our project.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any last comments? Okay, Joe, I'm going to pull you in then because you have participated many different times. What did you pull from this year that you would take forward?
A cool thing about this one for me was that it was the first time where we weren't relying on environmental driven data. It's been out collecting samples in the wild, almost all the other projects. And so it was a case where we were doing science in the building before coming to do science at the light source. And so the level of organization that I had to have to keep them on their track was different for me. And that was kind of an exciting new piece for me this time.
Very good. Do any of you have questions for us then? Okay, we'll let you off the hook. Good job, you guys. Thank you so much for all of your time and efforts. You did a great job. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Okay, you guys can go. It's gonna take me a minute to figure out how to shut this off. Do you have their certificates, Joe?
That was perfect timing, Tracy. We're about to start class again, so that was great.
Okay, that sounds good. And you'll give them their certificates for me and all that good stuff?
I will, yeah.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and leave and I'll figure out how to shut this down.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.